All right, so Zachary Epps, co-chair of the Finance Committee. I'm going to call the April 7th, 2026 meeting to order, starting with a roll call. Starting to my left.
Liam Mulhern, present.
Ross Whiting, present. Charles Burdell Williams, present.
Caroline Watts, present.
Mia Woodstein, present.
Robin Murphy, present.
Jennifer Loman, present.
Daniel Schultz, present. We'll wait a motion for the notes from our previous meeting.
So second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any- All in favor? That's unanimous. I didn't think I heard these votes, but all right, we'll hand it over to administration for our presentation. It was
Yeah, we blended well.
Thank you, Zachary.
Force, yeah. Wow. Okay. And we'll do it next time.
All right, tonight's Finance Committee, we will, as usual, look at our interim financial information through the end of the month of March and see how our general fund is performing, as well as our revenue collections and how they compare to prior years. We'll also take a look at the proposed final budget going into 26-27, keyword there being proposed. Also take a look at an early transportation contract renewal or consider an early transportation contract renewal as it's written into our existing contract. And last but not least, look at 2 agenda items for the board. All right, so looking at the balance sheet of the general fund, there are a couple changes from prior months and a couple things that stand out that I wanted to point out. You'll notice that we do have a decrease in cash year over year, and we typically see a very stable number in cash. And just a reminder, this is the money that was owed from the general fund to our capital reserve fund, which is used to finance the stadium project. So as that interfund payable drops, then our cash balance drops as well. Also, you'll notice there's some accrued salary and benefit differential in there. We had a very large PSERS payment and a very large insurance payment that last year at this time occurred in April, the first week in April, and this year, based on when spring break was, we made those payments the last week in March. So there's a little bit of a timing differential, but not really an expenditure differential in that. One other item to point out, last year was the first year in a long time we had deferred revenue. We had $1.1 million of tax equity money in deferred revenue. As you recall from prior presentations, we are to receive $2.2 million of tax equity money for the 26-27 school year. And we have already applied for it and received said money, so it is sitting in our bank account. It's accrued, sitting for next year and not recognized as revenue. Year over year, this year, we are almost at $125 million in revenue collection versus $120 million in prior year, so an increase of 4.6 million. And on the expenditure side, we are sitting at 98 million versus 95.7 versus last year, and we'll look at that in more detail on the next slide. So year over year growth in local source revenue, as you recall from prior months, that's tax revenue, that's interest income, that's better than expected collections on earned income tax and delinquent taxes. On the state side, this represents some of the increases that were proposed by the state budget that were realized year over year. And on the federal side, this time last year, we had collected the final remnants of some of the ESSER 3 money that was still being paid through September of 2024. And that is not realized, obviously, this year because that grant has completely expired. On the expenditure side, nothing stands out except for this $1.3 million increase in facilities. Again, if you recall, that's the $1.5 million we spent on the roof project that came back to us in the form of a grant, which we have largely received and is sitting up in state revenue. So those 2 items are kind of a wash. So we really don't have a traditional structural 4.6 million. It's more like a little over 3 million. And we don't have a year over year increase of $2.3 million in expenditures. It's more like a $500,000 expenditure increase year to date, which is a really good number for the district to realize such low expenditure growth year over year. Typically, we would fund a construction project out of a cap reserve or a capital project fund. The reason this project sits in this fund and kind of skewers our financial results is because the grant was written and had to be written through the general fund. From an accounting standpoint, it's very. This is a graphical representation of our structural surplus. You can see these appear to be colliding a little faster than usual, but we do have some money that's due to us in June from the state that's we did not receive partially because of the late budget impasse. So we are fully expecting to see our revenue expenditures meet towards the end of the year. We're not expecting any sort of large structural deficit. And looking at some of our largest local taxes year over year, March to March, we did have some settlements of some real estate tax assessment appeals that made this number not as large as has been in prior years, and that was anticipated at the start of the year. And the reason for the tax increase last year was to address some of the tax appeals that were coming our way this year. On the earned income tax side, we're still seeing growth in that category, which is in line with wage growth. The real estate transfer tax payments are starting to slow down from the county, and the delinquent real estate taxes are making up some of the shortfall on the real estate tax income side. And earnings on investments still remain strong. Some recent developments on the investment side, obviously we follow the Fed prime rate or the Fed reserve rate established for banks, and we were anticipating 2 rate drops through the end of the year. And now there is expectation that there will be no drops through the end of the year, which leaves more room for growth or cushion on the investment side. Before I move away from the interim financial information, any questions on the last 3 slides? All right, moving on to the proposed final budget. So we are in April, and moving on the Act 1 timeline, we are presenting the proposed final budget to the Financial Affairs Committee for approval of the proposed final budget at the legislative meeting next week, so that we can post the lengthy version of the proposed final budget on the district's website and at the front of the district office for public inspection, and keep that available for greater than 30 days. Had we approved the budget in May, there would not have been 30 days between the time we approved the proposed final budget and the time we adopted the budget, which is why we're doing it a little early this year. So that's the reason for the look at the budget tonight. Before we get into the numbers, I have displayed our budget from last year, the preliminary budget that we looked at back in February, and our proposed final budget on these 3 columns. Because it's so early in the year, we still predate some of our contractual obligations and some more significant information that comes in terms of staffing requirements and some of our contractual relationships. So again, proposed is the key word for this budget. As a placeholder in order to move forward on the budget, we do have proposed a tax increase to make the budget balance. Our maximum Act 1 tax increase is 3.5% for the 26-27 school year, and that is budgeted into our local revenue number. Again, this is a proposed budget. All that means is whatever we propose and whatever our final budget is, it could either be the same or come in lower than this proposed final budget number. And obviously our goal is to be below the Act 1 index in terms of the tax point increase as we continue to look for more savings across the district. So you'll notice from our preliminary budget, we were budgeting $106.3 million. That has increased to $109.8 million because of that proposed tax increase. On the state side, that remained largely unchanged. And on the federal side, that remained largely unchanged, as we don't anticipate very many budgetary or federal changes that have been presented before us. I believe we talked about that last month or the month before. Looking at revenue, we talked about the 3.5% tax increase in line with our Act 1 index. There were minimal increases in state subsidies that were budgeted. They were budgeted last time. We did manage to find some additional transportation subsidy money this year that we look forward to expanding next year and trying to maximize that benefit to the district. And that is reflected in the final budget as part of the increase. And we're still showing for our proposed final budget a shortfall of $735,000 to come out of our district fund balance and spending reserves in order to make the budget balance. Before I move on to expenditures, any questions on revenues?
So, and I know we have to use the Ready to Learn tax equity grant to offset tax increases. So essentially, or what we do, or are we saying that we're using that to not go above the Act 1 index?
We are using the $2 million of the tax equity money to balance the budget next year to avoid a tax increase. And that's reflected in our state source revenue. The tax.
Any other, Ms. Muller?
I just want, and this is mostly to clarify for myself and also just, well, to say it. When we look at this at the top line, from looking at this year's budget, the 107.9, and then we know what I meant, 107 million. And the preliminary budget with no tax increase, and that number is lower, and that's mostly because of the real estate, the tax assessments, that the appeals that
That's
where
correct.
we're not getting, so just reiterating for myself and in general, even if we did nothing, we would be getting less money without, it's not like we lowered taxes to get like that's.
Yes, we need a whole separate meeting to discuss the state tax sector.
Right.
The step value, the equity board, and real estate tax assessments.
Any other question? Schultz?
Just because I think it's helpful to link that concept to an actual number and potentially even in terms of percentage. If we had not raised taxes, if it was a 0%, our revenues would go down. It's around
1.5 million.
1.5 million, which is itself essentially a 1.5% tax decrease that we need to offset with an equivalent increase to just hit status quo. That's huge. I think that's really important for us to understand and anyone listening to understand, because as we're talking to community members about a 3.5% tax increase that still has a deficit, they're going to be like, what are you all doing? And the answer is, well, this isn't something we have control over. I have a question though. In future years, that is just that until there's a future, these things have a little bit of a pendulum. If the economy's going great, then we might reverse appeal, etc. But do we have a sense if there are any other major looming additional appeals that we are going to need to be thinking about strategically? Not to get into the weeds, but just next year, or is it possible we're going to have yet another loss of another million? I know we're not going to get this 1.5 back.
So looking at our largest taxpayers, we budgeted for most of them.
Okay.
And most of them are in the process of resolution, and that's what I was saying.
Understood. That answers my question. Thank you.
I guess from a revenue perspective as well, the 2.2 million that we're going to use next year, that came as a result of us increasing taxes previous year.
No, that's essentially the state used to funnel all of their subsidy money through the basic ed subsidy and the special ed subsidy. Because of changes in the passage of the budget, that money has been directed through the DPD rather than through the Department of Education, and that money came through us. It's essentially a subsidy, a state subsidy.
The tax equity supplement.
Mhm.
But for clarity, it's not in anticipation of the tax increase that we're considering now. It's responding to what we did last year.
Yeah, it's essentially taking our subsidy.
Right.
If you accept this subsidy money, you have to use it for these purposes, one of which is offsetting future tax increases.
And so but then for this next year, the increase, it doesn't respond to a 3.5. It's essentially like just a little bit more than what we got last year.
So
Because-
it is proposed to be a phased in grant. So we got 1.1 million, then it's 2.2. I would anticipate next year to be 3.3. So it would increase like a traditional subsidy would. It would increase slowly over time.
Got it.
So it's kind of funding itself as it is.
Just not at the pace that we are.
So last year, for this current year, the subsidy is 1.1 million. Next year is 2.2. So year over year, it's a $1.1 million increase.
Okay, I got it. I guess that helps a little.
And it's also important that that money is also, the state recognizes that every district is facing real estate tax assessment appeals, and that's one of the uses of the tax equity money to offset those appeals. In our case, it's all the same because the need is there.
It's all
Just because I saw an aha moment that I think translated one for me, and I want to make sure I had this. We are not anticipating additional state revenue increases from this. There's going to be another budget from the state that may have increases, but the nature of these increases are we don't actually get to think of them for this budget cycle. We have to wait until next year's budget cycle, just based on what you're saying. So you're saying you would anticipate that we would get another 1.1, but that would not happen until the 27, 28 budget cycle. So we can't suddenly use that for this budget.
I'm going to confuse everybody.
Okay.
In a traditional budget year, that's true. The
Uh-oh.
tax equity money we have already received. So we already know we're going to get it because we physically have it in our bank account. So that 2.2 million is already locked in.
2.2 is,
which
but
is-
the 3.3 is not, is what I'm saying. That additional 1.1, third round.
Correct. The state still has to fund the minor increases to the basic ed subsidy, the special ed subsidy, the social security reimbursement, and the PSERS reimbursement. That still has to be funded.
And that is why we're not incorporating that into these numbers, because we're waiting until the dust settles there, and then the money is also allocated.
Well, they're somewhat significant, so they are included in this budget. Because I don't want to leave $500,000, $1 million off the table that
Good to know.
is more than likely money we're going to get. And ask for a tax increase knowing that money is going to come. So
Thank you.
I'm trying to be as precise as possible.
And as a quick follow, and maybe this will be addressed as we get into the expenditures, but where is that 700,000 reflected? Because right here, I'm seeing just the, assets plus.
Oh, here, this is our fund balance.
Oh, we would,
Fund
got
balance,
it.
sort of
In order to balance it.
our position.
Got it. Okay. Ms. Loman?
I'm still struggling with this, and maybe we can just talk about this later. Like, if we didn't have the tax equity subsidy, if we didn't have the 2.2 million, what would we have to increase our taxes?
We can't.
5.5%.
So in the past, the state funding would come from different sources. It wouldn't come as a tax equity grant. It would come as an increase to the basic ed subsidy of $1 million, special ed subsidy of $500,000. So this is all just a change in the mechanism in which they're funding school districts.
So they're not actually giving us more?
We are getting a little bit more. We are getting more,
Okay.
but it's also coming in a different,
Okay.
And at a different time.
time. I'm trying to add clarity to this, but I feel like.
Before you go.
Okay, I'll just test that.
I mean, I'll just say, the bottom line is we get a certain amount of money from the state. If we didn't get that money from the state, either we would have to cut expenses by that amount.
Right.
Use our fund balance, or raise taxes above the Act 20 index. I mean, that is the simple. the $250,000 transportation grant, which I want to take a moment to celebrate because I appreciate that that was discovered, applied for, and received, and it's a new thing. Do we expect that to be an annual thing that we are able to get in the future?
Yes, and all the credit goes to Dawn Woods, our transportation director. She is really digging into the transportation subsidy, making sure that she finds every dollar that we can get. Fresh eyes on the process has really helped find the extra money.
Thank you.
Dr. White?
How do we avoid a structural deficit next year?
So we're still in the midst of determining what staffing is going to be for the next year. The one contractual piece we're waiting on is the deadline in our collective bargaining agreement for professional staff of when retirement notices are required to be submitted, and that is April 15th. And that is obviously a big number. Once we get that number, it gives us the flexibility and the ability to, kind of figure out exactly what our staffing requirements are and where people need to be and how we can. Because obviously, of our 400 employees, 400 teaching employees, they all have different certifications. They can fill different voids, and we are also working on filling our student requests for classes next year and trying to assess our enrollment, which, as you recall, in the past 2 years, our current kindergarten and first grade class have been right around 250 when we typically see over 300 size class. So if we anticipate another one, we anticipate reduced requirement for teaching staff the elementary level.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have slides on this, pictures?
I do, yes.
Should we move forward?
Yes, and that's a great segue to the expenditure side. Some of the changes that occurred there, and that would primarily be in our staffing. And our teaching and special ed staff are right here in the first two line items. So we talked about the decreasing in budgeted staff to match our decreasing elementary enrollment and secondary class demand. The other large piece, which also was in those same two line items, was health insurance is associated with those same two classes, instructional staff and special ed staff. And that was a reduction in our first look health insurance premium, which was a 22% increase, we have now gotten down to a 9.4% increase. And that's a combination of receiving some of our stop loss insurance money we were able to put back into the fund and having several months now of much better self-insured health insurance returns. So our claims were much lower the past 3 months than they had been for the prior 9. And that's helped reestablish our balance at the trust. And some other notes of some other large increases from prior years was just the PSERS rate remained flat. So luckily that wasn't something we had to deal with this year. And our transportation costs, obviously, are one of our other larger contractual increases is in there as well at 4%. So I glossed over it. Dan, you were asking about where preliminary versus proposed final budget changes were on the revenue side. I apologize, I'm jumping around a little bit, but this real estate tax decrease on the preliminary budget is really what is killing us going into the next year. And then we talked about the $250,000 subsidy that factored into the proposed final budget and the tax increase that turned this from a negative to a positive and helped us get to $145 million in revenue to nearly balance our budget. And if we do that same exercise on the expenditure side, obviously we found some savings in our benefits and our salaries and wages. As you recall, 70% of our costs are wages and benefit costs from our staff. So that's obviously where we look for, or we can find those significant savings. How does that 9.4% final look at health insurance stack up to the industry average? We looked at this graph in the past. There's been a lot of uncertainty in prior years, and 8.5% has kind of been the stagnant rate the past 3 years. Our 9.4 is probably within that window. And if you'll recall last year, we had a 1% increase through negotiation of some better contracts on the health insurance side. So if we look at this in average, I think we're doing better than industry average by managing our fund and our benefits a little better. So work to continue as more information comes in, review staffing, look for additional savings, continue to review every and all contracts. Any contract that comes across my desk that has a larger than acceptable increase immediately goes back to a vendor for reconsideration. And obviously, we're going to continue to monitor revenue drivers and how they're calculated and try and maximize those as well. As mentioned prior, the proposed final budget will be posted to the district website for public inspection. It will be more detailed than what was presented. It will contain all of the sub-accounts for all of the revenue and expenditure classifications, so they can be viewed in their entirety. And the final budget approval is scheduled for June 9th here at the district admin building. And before I close out the preliminary budget, just a look into the future, as we're always thinking into the future and where school district finance is headed. This year, our base Act 1 index was 3.5%. As we look forward to the next 4 years, the Independent Fiscal Office released their forecast for the Act 1 index, and it remains tight going into the next 4 years, roughly 3% per year. Obviously subject to change, but they're usually pretty good about their forecasts. And this represents the state average and federal factors for wage movement of labor across the state and across the federal government. So they're looking at what the average wage change is as a primary factor in developing this Act 1 index. All right, I think that's my last preliminary budget, or proposed budget slide.
This is just an informational question for me, Mr. Swigert, as I get to know our budgets. You said 70% of our annual expenditures are salaries and benefits. How does that compare locally to other districts that are comparable to us, and also other districts when we think about recruiting and retaining quality staff that we would be competing against?
So most districts are funded in a very similar manner. Most are in the 65 to 70% range for staffing and benefits.
Yeah, and our salary and benefits packages kind of roughly are competitive within them.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Highly competitive.
But yes.
Maybe top 3.
I know that we're working on developing an updated or new strategic plan. Curious as to I can't sort of how but current kind of goals, how is that also reflected in the budget and kind of what we're considering? Like, do we have budgeted for some additional support stuff for MTSS or whatever
So our first goal for some of those initiatives is to try and fund them out of our existing budget or repurpose grants to address those needs. Like the MTSS grant could be funded, the PCCD monies we get each year. Some of the larger initiatives, obviously we're only required by law to have a formal budget process for the general fund, which is the vast majority of what the school district does. But we do have a capital reserve and capital project fund that is also used to fund some of our larger capital initiatives that we looked at last month, I believe.
No.
I wanted to say everyone, because I had a similar question. So we did hear a lot. I think part of the theme was sort of mental health over the last year and some of the contracts that we've approved. And also, I feel like everywhere I buy a certain number of Chromebooks, but like it's like we have certain things that we know. Okay, we're gonna be paying for these things that actually go into the schools and so forth. So is there, and I guess maybe this is when Dr. Savage would come to the table, but are there things that we know or that we're hearing from principals or something like, obviously we're holding status quo. And if we go back to that, we don't see a huge increase in like supplies and student things, right? So is there a theme or do we know of like where the focus of investment, I guess maybe that's kind of where you were going with it, like, we know the pillars of the strategic plan, we know that's being refreshed, but what in this budget reflects what's in that plan or what's next for us? Is that kind of?
But I use the
Yeah.
PCC money as an example that
Yeah.
we received $178,000 and the vast majority of that went into mental health sports for students. So I think it's taking our existing resources and aligning them with those strategic pillars rather than adding additional spending categories to the budget. And in this case, utilizing some existing funding to better match our strategic plan.
And the majority is really programmatic around curriculum,
Correct.
to be quite honest. I
Okay,
mean,
and that's,
That's what
yeah,
I
that's
was-
kind of what I was.
Yeah, that's some heavy onboarding that we're about to do, especially with ELA coming down the pipe.
Like implementing the
Well,
curriculum or the
purchasing.
yeah, to innovation. Okay.
Yeah, we don't tout enough, but this past fiscal year, we made an $800,000 investment into curriculum. I'm not the person to discuss how that's implemented, but I can tell you how much it costs.
Yeah, I know, that's,
Yeah,
no, that's what I'm.
And how many years that's amortized going forward. That's not a
Yeah.
1-year expense. That's it is a 1-year expense that's good for the next so many years. But yes, we've made significant investment using our existing budget into curriculum and to drive learning with students.
Mr. Schultz.
Just a wild thought, which is like, do schools ever have other, I mean, we have a capital budget. Do districts ever have a curriculum budget where it's similarly like we know that we are going to be wanting to invest X into an investment that's amortized over time?
So if you look at our org tree,
Mhm.
each director has their own budget
Okay,
in that
that's
org tree. And every Monday at 9:00, a budget report goes out to each director so they can see exactly how much they have, how much they spent, and how much is sitting out there in queue that they've already ordered that hasn't. Yes, each department has its own budget and it's its own mini
Makes sense.
presentation.
Wonderful. So within this budget, this proposed budget, I said 750,000 at some point, 735,000, 15,000 counts. How many, do you have a sense? I know we don't know how many retirements are in, and we don't necessarily know how many positions will be filled of those retirements, but are any of those baked into this budget yet? Or is it, we will find that out in that final iteration?
I believe there are more. I think we will solidify.
Okay.
Because obviously nothing is certain until it's in writing.
Sure.
We're going to solidify.
But there are some of these numbers, when you go back to the expense slide, when you highlighted, hey, there are, this was, last time we looked at this budget, it was 1.5, now it's 800 something. That is through attritional savings, presumably, of some kind. Okay. I want to, the deficit, a structural deficit, for as a board, we can't sustain ourselves with a structural deficit. So at some point that hole has to be filled. And so again, translating that to, it's like a locked in future tax increase. We have to increase taxes next year by 0.75%. That's where we're starting. The max we can do is 3%. And so that means, first off, we have to live within that in order to get rid of a structural deficit, but also if we wanted to not hit Act 1, it's going to be that much harder. And so, Dr. Whiting, you asked, how do we avoid a structural deficit next year? I assume you meant for the next budget, like
Correct. Yes.
And so contract negotiations is really, really important for that. And then also positions. So, when we have an opportunity to not create a new position and can use existing resources, which obviously we are not making those granular decisions, but I think we can help set expectations or tone or what kinds of questions are we asking when we're presented with new positions? Are we, and then maybe that can trickle down. But with 70% of our budget being those two salaries and wages, those are the two levers we really have is what positions do we either fill or create? And what do we contractually agree to in terms of increases over time? So that's not a question, that was just more, I hope that we can find ways to plug that hole this year. I will forever optimistically hope that we could even somehow be slightly below Act One, because I think that really helps us move in the direction we need to move compared to our peers. But just as one board member, thank you for this, the diligence that went into this. I know it's been a lot of work, and the fact that we were able to move to where we are today from where we were 2 months ago is itself a huge amount of effort. So thank you.
Yes, it's a team effort. I think Siobhan's on the website. She's been really very, very helpful in us trying to find that staff savings.
I did have a question, but I'm gonna save it and ask Dr. Savage separately because it's about curriculum materials. So I'll just hold off for next week. But we do have a little notification there.
On the table, but on the phone.
Here she comes.
You're good at it.
Well, actually, in that case.
I don't know if the recording knows what we're laughing at.
Oh, okay. We see Dr. Savage is here with us. Could I ask that question? Is that okay? Okay. My question is, as part of curriculum ordering, as part of the budget, in terms of materials, consumables versus digital subscriptions. Just it's like, it's not really a fully formed question, but like, do we know what we're spending on one versus the other yet? Is that
You mean like classroom supplies?
consumables, meaning like books that come with a specific program that would be like handed out to every child, like a workbook that would be used by them and then not able to be reused. So that versus having like a digital subscription to IXL or other kinds of study island. I'm not saying I'm asking for these things. I'm just putting them out there as examples. Personally, I'm interested in, oh, she's answering it. Okay. Sorry.
So just for the record, we are currently scoping consumables, online adaptive programs, and digital platforms now so that we can create a full budget proposal. That comes from the Director of Teacher and Learning, Siobhan Savage.
Thank you.
Off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you how much of each, but if I could go back and look, and obviously we map that spending out. So if we have a 6-year online subscription for science material, that hits the budget for the next 6 years. Likewise with any other material, even a textbook has a useful life that's amortized over the period.
Thank you. Oh,
We are gathering quotes for what we've mapped for next year, including the K-5.
thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Ms. Long?
Yeah. This is, again, we didn't call it out explicitly, but just thank you, Mr. Swigert and everyone, getting that health insurance number down from 22% to 9.5%. A big part of what Mr. Schultz was talking about, I think, in all of that work going into getting, we were at what, $6.5 million a few months ago, kind of in a deficit, trying to figure out how to get us to what is still a deficit, but a much, much, much smaller one. So thank you for that diligence.
Part of it's been luck, part of it has been the board and the negotiation team working on those benefit costs through our last 2 contract negotiations. And part of it's just been turning down some options like, I'm gonna get this wrong, GLP-1s, we don't offer them, some other districts opted, and that's a huge cost driver going forward. So we're always trying to be very cognizant of how much we spend on the health insurance side.
And the other thing I was going to say, because it just kind of goes along with what Ms. Blitzstein asked and what Ms. Savage is talking about, just talking about the curriculum and resources overall, is we have that chart that shows us, right, like in each year, what we're supposed to be working on. So I think that helps from a planning perspective, knowing, oh, next year is when we're looking at K-5 science and in 2 years, you know, so now that that kind of back end work has been done, I think it sets us up to plan better, know, you know, we don't know the exact amount, but we know what's kind of on the horizon.
Just last point, just just based on what you mentioned in terms of enrollment at the elementary school level, I guess, what happens? What's that next step? Like, assuming that's what happens, right? Enrollment's lower, and then you said, you know, there might not be as many staff needed, and like, so like, what happens?
So the fewer students and the smaller the class sizes get to the point where, you know, 2 classes are essentially the same size as one, and they're consolidated.
With a teacher, what happens with a teacher?
So if we wait for that retirement number, and if we don't need to fill that position, then we lose a position.
The flip side is we're losing enrollment.
No, I get that,
Right.
but if the enrollment is lost, my question is sort of like, then it
Has
seems
to
like
translate
that
it.
role is eliminated.
Well, you still the same number of student to teacher ratio is still the same at the elementary school level. Because there's just less kids. There's 50 less, there's 100 less kids now. K-1. So that's, you know, 25 students per classroom, which is the maximum size per board policy. That's four teaching positions.
So the role is eliminated. I'm just trying to get that.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
role,
Okay.
the role, but
Not the
we.
person.
But not the
person.
person. So that's where I'm, but not the actual person. Something, that person is just, I guess,
Reabsorb.
somewhere, it's just somewhere else.
Attrition, you
In this, okay. Thank you. I don't see another hands or.
I think it's important to note that our enrollment drop, like when we did that enrollment study 2 years ago, and they talked about where it's coming from, it is directly proportional to birth rate in the
Yeah.
whole Delaware Valley. Like, this is not a unique, again, we talk about unique to Shelton. This is not a unique experience to us. This is the birth rate, this is the enrollment, and that is moving very proportionally.
Yeah, question for clarity, not trying to contest. All right, I think we have more to discuss. So is this a good moment to move forward? I don't see any other hands.
Yes, next, transportation contract renewal. So currently our transportation contract is with Cheltenham Transportation. It runs through June 30th, 2028, the 27-28 school year. There is a clause in our contract, there is a renewal option, that if we commit to a 5-year renewal beyond that date by June 30th, 2026, the Cheltenham Transportation will make a one-time contribution to the Cheltenham Education Foundation of $200,000, and we will be locked in at an annual rate of 3% for 5 years going forward after that date. Just a little contextual information. One, our transportation budget is $9.1 million. Of that $9.1 million, $6.7 million this year was for the Cheltenham Transportation contract itself. They run approximately 100 routes a day between bus routes and van routes. They do our midday, late day field trip runs. They also provide approximately 20 monitors per day on bus routes for our students. And they own their own bus storage and maintenance facility, and all of the personnel and all of the costs that goes with it. And our current contract through 27-28 has an annual rate increase of 4%. So we're kind of at a crux here. Do we want to lock in a 3% increase for the 5 years beyond 27-28? Or do we want to go status quo and see where the world takes us at the end of this contract? So this conversation is to help us make that decision and to provide some more information that we've gathered. So I gathered information across the rest of Montgomery County. Not every district has outsourced transportation. There are a good number of school districts that do all of their transportation in-house and have their own transportation centers. These are the 7 I pulled from across the county. I listed what the current daily rates are for each of the contracts I analyzed, and it's broken down by type of service. So a 72 passenger bus, or the large buses you see on the road, that's the majority of our bus service that we receive in most other districts. There are also 30 passenger buses. They're the half buses you see driving around. We have a different price for a 30 passenger lift bus because they tend to run a little slower because of the work required to use a lift bus, and because the bus itself costs a little more money. but you can see that pricing structure didn't translate across the rest of the county like it did for us. And obviously we run 9 passenger vans and we're billed separately for midday, late day, route attendants, which will be our bus aides. So I listed all of the rates across the county, and you can see that on our primary core service of 72 passenger buses, our rate is very competitive. When we look at some of those other contracts going out, some of them stop in 2 years, and some of them continue out almost as far as ours. Our current 4% increase is very competitive, and a 3% increase looking out in the future is also a very competitive rate. And the one district that kind of appears to be an outlier is this District 7 out here, and that district happens to be kind of further out in the county, further north, further away from urban centers, which transportation is generally more expensive around Philadelphia because a 5-mile route doesn't mean the same thing when you're not dealing with traffic in the sticks. So. And the last piece of this decision that's important is the district provided facility piece. So when we talk about, do we renew early? Do we wait till the end of this contract? Do we do an RFP? Do we look for another transportation contractor? The one piece that will be difficult to overcome is anyone coming in and bidding on this transportation contract will have to provide a facility or operate a facility that's within the general location of Cheltenham School District. And that is an obstacle to competition in this particular contract. So we already have a competitive rate. We have what appear to be competitive rate increases going forward, and we have a lot of uncertainty with what an RFP might look like. So just presenting all this information is something to consider. This decision doesn't have to be made and approved until before June 30th of 2026. But I just wanted to put this out there now and get that conversation started so it doesn't fall off our radar. And there's ample time for consideration and questions as we near that decision point.
Ms. Blitzing?
I have 2 thoughts. My first instinct is like, yes, renew. Like oil, an unknown, renew. And then my second thought is, okay, oil is an unknown, then why are we relying on oil? And is there a possibility for a more sustainable fleet? Is that like in the realm
So
of
we
possible?
still pay for gasoline and propane. That's separate outside of this contract. That's the other.
Oh, that's outside.
This is the
of
vehicles.
this.
This is the
Vehicles and the
and
drivers.
the drivers and the insurance and the maintenance, the
And then
management.
we pay whatever the rate is, the going rate is for the fuel.
So the majority of our fleet is propane already. I don't think electrified buses are quite where they need to be. They're enormously expensive and the infrastructure has to be installed. And that's the one downside to not having our own facility. If we talk about putting in infrastructure for electrical buses, we can't accept a grant and put it on private property. We have to be our own property, so it limits us in our flexibility.
No, thank you.
Dr. Watts?
Are we satisfied with cost aside, are we satisfied with the quality of service that we're getting in this contract? Do we have an adequate number of buses and drivers to do all the transporting that we need in a reasonable time over the zone that we have to cover, including after-school recreation, sports, all of that stuff? I'm seeing, Rachel,
I have not taken so much pressure from Josh before. I don't know what that is.
So they have, for the most part, adequately staffed in comparison to other districts.
This has definitely been a better year than years past, for sure. And part of that is leadership also within the department.
Somewhat related, because I think just some context, we design the routes, correct? Like these are rates per route per XYZ. So ultimately, if we wanted to add a route or run more late buses, we would be able to do that. We would pay these rates for that, but we determine them. One question I have related to what you're asking is, if we renewed, would there be any opportunity to look at non-financial language related to any type of oversight that we wish we, because I know we've had incidents related to transportation under this contract. And so ultimately, we as a district are exposed from a reputation and community service perspective when something goes wrong and a driver hasn't been adequately trained, even though we are not directly doing the training. So my question is, if we renew, is there any opportunity for us to strategically revisit the sort of soft side of the contract, the required trainings or reporting to us on what's happening? Or is it, no, if we renew, we're locked into the same terms that we had last time?
There's already performance language in the contract.
But let's just pretend there were, I was brainstorming. So let's pretend that folks who actually know what we would love to have in our dream contract, can we ask for those things? Or would they just basically say, no, it's either a yes or a no?
You can absolutely ask, and it may be yes or maybe no.
Okay. Well, we wouldn't be like legally required to do an RFP to have those conversations at least. Okay. Thank you.
And this kind of goes, I think, to what we got to earlier, the difference, the slide that shows what percentage of our transportation budget is the contract and what is not. It's pretty much the staff that we pay, which is 2 people, I think. And
Yes, so it's 9.1 million, 6.7. We are about $1.75 million in transportation services provided by the IU,
okay,
which is for students with severe needs. So
Right.
you're talking routes that have accompanying nurses, which is just
Okay.
beyond the scope of a traditional transportation company. It's propane, it's gas, it's insurance. It's our staff.
yeah, okay, I just wanted to have an idea of what so the 6.7 is what we're talking about when we're talking about a 3%.
Oh, yeah, it's probably over 8 million that is just pure paid for transportation service
Okay.
in one form or the other.
And then this is a clarification. I don't like to assume things, but it says, I see like midday, late, like the after school buses, the field trip. I don't see anything about athletic buses, like going to games. Is that included in here somewhere?
You
Or
can
is
call it later, you can call it field trip.
Okay, it's just how it's categorized. I just wanted to understand, because there's a lot of buses going to a lot of different places every day. So I just wanted to understand.
I was trying to hit the highlights.
No, that's totally fine.
More expensive.
Okay. Thank you.
So the slide that was just there with the comparison to other districts, I mean, 3%, looking at this, 3% a year looks like a pretty, financially, like a pretty good deal. Yeah. What is District 1 doing?
Party buses.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of factors that can go in a contract. Some districts have further restrictive language on what a contractor can do. Some districts are unionized, and different costs, different established costs and benefit costs. So
But at least round one. Yes, yeah, I agree, like from a financial perspective, like, yes, like, locked in at 3, no one else pretty much is at 3, like there's things like that. But I guess from a also performance perspective, are there other things that you get when you pay more? Or is the rate literally like the negotiated thing, or are there other things that other districts are getting that they're paying for that?
So without going too far into the weeds, there probably is some facility differential, like maybe some districts have to provide their own mechanic, or in order to get that kind of detail, that would be a very long project.
But they would be paying more if they had their own, but I don't.
So our rate is encompassing, they might be paying.
It just could be whatever their deal is. That's kind of.
Like this district owns its own facility. Does this include a mechanic? Does it include I don't know all the answers to that.
Right.
And it doesn't matter because it's, they have a higher rate going forward that, we will catch up to.
At some point, yeah. So essentially, we're all paying for the same thing, just different rates.
Different forms.
Good, just because we've had a round of board or Mr. Schultz, and then we'll come.
Kind of,
Yeah.
asking what you're asking, but I think it's hard, from a financial perspective, it seems like there's a clear answer. And so the question that I don't necessarily know the answer to is, are there other, is there a reason to not continue this contract? Like, what is the decision being made here? Because if it's just the finances, it's clearly one decision's the right answer. Or what is the trade-off of continuing this contract as opposed to not? And if that's not answerable right now, I know we have until July, but that is the question in my mind or June. Yeah. We have time is my point. So I don't need an answer, but that's the thing that I don't fully understand right now. So
there's you could slice and dice this any way you wanted. You could pull apart this contract and get a different piece out. There's no established number of routes that are required to be run in this contract, because as you pointed out, we tell them how many routes we need them to run. If you want to flip it entirely, what does it cost to become a district-owned operation, and do we have the space and the capability, which in a 2-year window is probably not feasible to put a whole new transportation facility in a final location. So there's it's wide open. There's a lot of considerations. Thanks.
We have a question from our marvelous community member in residence.
Hi, my name is Donna Malcolm. I live in Elkins Park. I have a question. I heard your Dr. Scriven and Dr. Watts. What about the quality? Do you have some insight on, is this something we want to continue on as far as what they provide? I understand the routes and what they've done, but quality of service.
So there have been some public incidents in the past. And you obviously, when you deal with a bus transportation company, you always hear about the bad things, but there's also a lot of good things that happen with the organization, and a lot of business that's conducted that doesn't get talked about, because obviously, people don't want to celebrate a bus route that is on time. It gets every day, because that's the expectation. So that's my answer to that question. That as I push this out there, that's kind of the feedback that I look for from the public, from the school board, from our own team internally.
No,
Go ahead.
I understand that things happen. I just want to know how it's addressed. Not how it's addressed, but making sure that things going forward they're being proactive. That's just what I'm concerned about when we go forward with that.
There is language in the contract where if a route isn't performed or something is not done of a satisfactory nature, there are penalties within the contract to incur that behavior, to curb that behavior, and encourage better training, and don't miss a route and leave kids standing on the corner because it's going to cost you this amount of money next time it happens.
Was it not there before? I'm sorry. I will stop.
No, it's fine.
It's in that. The contract is public. It's there. It's in the contract now.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And we have a supervisor that
And yet,
really has fluid communication with their management,
she's really good. Yeah.
and she's hands-on, which I think is making a difference. I know that in the safety study, we were actually committed for some of the features that are on our buses, and they have been very amenable to partnering with some of those initiatives, like the bus stop initiative, the GPS initiative. I mean, there's things that we are doing in district that quite a few are not.
You said the safety study, the buses were included in the safety? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know that. Okay, thank you.
Dr. Whiting, then Dr.
Thank you. Anecdotally, I know that it seems there's perceptual improvements over time in transportation across the district, but anecdote is also not evidence. And so I tend to err towards the side of, is there information we might be able to collect via a short survey about the quality of service that might inform if we want to ask for specific contract language that says, we'd really like to have this X train, or the major problem that we have is on-time buses or whatever. Like, just that in my mind does not have to be a huge lift, And maybe that data is already available somewhere or has been considered in some way, but I just wanted to throw that out as like, if we're in a position where I think our largest consideration in this is quality, then let's get a perceptual information about how people feel about the quality of the current service. Period. That's just a suggestion, not a mandate or.
I think I wanted to make a point that dovetails on what you were saying and also what you're saying, Dr. Whiting, which is, I'm learning something every meeting. And so one thing I learned here is that they give us the vehicles and they give us the personnel. We tell them the routes. So when we're looking at perceptions of quality, it's important to know who we're holding accountable for what. If the buses are constantly breaking down, as opposed to if the people driving the buses are not dealing with our kids the way we want them to be, or we're writing routes that are not feasible at a time of day or something like that. So I think it's helpful for us to know what each side in the agreement is in charge of. And then if there's an issue, is there a mechanism for resolution that actually works pretty well? I think we'd be silly to assume that there would never be incidents. But if there are incidents, are they at a low level, and do they get resolved in a good and professional way? And those are things we can also measure.
I just said that trying to put quality in context is also important, because if you think about the grass is greener with this company, maybe this
Yeah.
company has the same
I'm
issues.
sure.
Coming from another district, the district I came from, we were half in-house and we were half outsourced with a whole separate bus company. And some of the issues we dealt with this company, I'm like, I've seen this before, I've dealt with this before. They're recurring issues. It's tough. In my time since I've been here, I came here in 2022. It's a little tough to assess because we're coming out of the recession, the COVID.
Yeah.
And there was a massive driver shortage. So a lot of our issues appear to be when subs are filling in, or full-time drivers who are not doing things because they just don't have the experience. So.
And that has led to the issue, I'm sorry.
No.
That has led to some of the other conversations that we've been having about traffic around some of our schools, because coming out of COVID in a situation where there was a bus driver shortage, more parents got used to driving their kids to school. And so now we have traffic patterns that are exceeding things we discussed.
So I always have to be the voice of reason. We can look at what options are. We can look at how far we can extend out this contract or not. But if this is something that we have to look at in 2026, Eric Faust is the owner. He's very strategic. He's positioned himself extremely well. There's a point that Mr. Swigert made that, as astute as you guys are as a board, I'm sure you picked up on. Logistically, regardless of how you feel, it would be extremely hard to get a service to push in, and we're sitting in April. I'm just trying to be a real voice right now. Yeah. So great questions. I love it, but at some point, I just have to be real with her. We have a job to do, which we're doing from the standpoint of quality and accountability. But we need to have a deeper conversation if, as a board, there's some considerations around moving a different direction. This is not the year to do that. It's not even possible. So I would say, I think we should pull out parts of the contract to relate to some of the questions that you guys asked to share. Quality is from the eye of who completes the survey. And I would say, let's table this and we'll bring more information which I think that could be beneficial to you guys as a whole group as we look at what moving forward could look like.
And I'll just wanted to underscore, my questions were more rooted in at a point of leverage in quotes. Are there any requests we would make with this contract? And not for us to make a decision, but more as just an opportunity to say, boy, we wish 4 years ago we had included language that
I think it's valid, but I think we need to pull and share with you
Right.
the language which is currently in there. I think that as administration, we have some due diligence
Right.
that we should do for you guys as a board, so you actually know what's currently there. And then we could have a conversation, right, around potentially what you might want to see included if you don't see it. So not shutting anyone down. I'm very receptive because transportation is huge. And like I said, this year in comparison to past years, it has definitely been a better year for us. Holistic. Yeah, holistic.
I know, I just said, I think that, thank you, Dr. Scriven, thank you, Ms. Schultz, and I think we're all able to see those numbers, we're in it, we just talked about the proposed budget for next year, I think all, pretty aware of the financial constraints that we have and knowing that every decision we make from this contract to every other contract we'll make will be really a down to the penny, is this the best, we need to be thinking of those things. And I think that it's also good to ask those questions so that we make sure that we're also getting what we need to get from the contract, even if the answer is yes, we're moving forward, but, or I should say not but, and here's something. So thank you. I think a little context is helpful for all of us, but I think several of us have said it, like the math makes sense. I think the math is mathing, yeah. So
But we don't.
I don't want to belabor.
We don't
it,
want.
but
Yeah, we do. But there's a standard, right? We also have an
I
expectation.
think that's
And I'm clear.
Yeah.
I'm clear with that. So we, even if it means having them come out and do a presentation for you guys, I don't think that's unreasonable. So we'll figure out a best path forward.
I think there's one more section.
There is.
Not in detail, but I think we have one more
So
section.
before we move on, there's been a
Okay.
little bit of shuttling and transparency. I just want to say they are a valuable partner to the district.
absolutely.
The school day starts the moment that the student is picked up. It ends when they're dropped off at home. And in large part, there have been words in the past, but they are a valuable partner to the school district.
Thanks for that.
All right, board approval. Again, we're trying to get ahead of price increase curve on Chromebooks. So we're looking at buying another 1,200 Chromebooks through CDW, through federal contract, the total cost of $387,000. The price increase will go up in another couple of weeks to approximately $50 a unit. So it's a $50,000 savings. I think I did the math right. Maybe I got too many 50s in my math. Overall, it's approximately $50,000 savings by jumping on this rather than waiting until July 1. And we talked about the access controls earlier, so I won't beat this to death. Current system is end of life. It's being upgraded, but not featured, not enhanced, meaning they're not looking at changing it into something new. So we are in a situation where we are running out of time with it. We need to move on to something new. The $62,000 cost we talked about earlier, that's mostly licensing to move to that new product. That's a one-time fee to slide over. And then we do have conversion of our other remaining buildings at a cost of $25,000 to move to that new system as well. Then we would have every building on one system with, as Mr. Carter described, instantaneous response capabilities with staff, which will make all of our students safe.
Mrs. Blitz.
Thank you. Just a question about the Chromebooks and what is and I don't know if you can answer this, and if not, that's fine. You can ask Dr. Savage about this, who may be able to answer it. But in terms of where those 1,200 are going, I mean, I know that just out of use, they need to be replaced just due to wear and tear. But I also know that as we're thinking about very thoughtful use, considerate and thoughtful use of technology. And also thinking about things like the cursive requirement that is now been instated. Just thinking about like how those are being utilized with our youngest learners. And I don't think that they're going home with them anymore. Is that correct?
They're on carts, yeah.
They're on carts. Okay. So just in terms of like sustaining their lives of the Chromebooks and best practices for our kids. I just want to sort of see where that stood. Those Chromebooks and use of them.
So in terms of how they're used for education,
K and
not my
K-
meeting, but
K-
yeah.
K1 and 2, I'm just really thinking about like more hands-on, more handwriting, more like actual paper and pencil, less Chromebook usage. Like especially since our kindergartners who were kindergartners during the pandemic were handed, I see Dr. Savage is responding, but were handed Chromebooks as the only tool they could have school with. So, but I know that we're trying to maybe pull back from that a little bit.
So I can answer some of that as well. So
Okay.
we're still 1-to-1. So we still have to, there's a 4-year life. There's 4,000 students. There's a percentage of breakage. So we're replacing approximately 1,000 Chromebooks a year. And that falls in line with that cycle. They're not forever units. They're not like an Apple computer that lasts a long time. They're disposable. Now the carts have done a tremendous job in keeping Chromebooks from sliding into backpacks, being thrown against the wall, dragged across the bus. So it is, dramatically. I'm just thinking of my own 9-year-old.
Yeah.
I'm home and he tosses his book bag and his Chromebooks inside. So obviously the carts have reduced the amount of breakage, particularly at the elementary school level. And the plan is to expand that. And I'm going to step out on here. I believe the plan is to expand that even further.
In terms of cart usage.
Cart use.
Oh, great.
But that, yeah,
I'm
like,
like expand. Okay, great. Thank
But
you.
we're still replacing the availability of those devices.
You wanna look at Doc's response?
Yes.
All you said was Chris Brown will be able to answer questions about useful life. We all
I'm gonna
know.
have them do a board update.
Mom,
I have a quick question. When was our last purchase of Chromebooks?
We bought another 1,000 last year at this time. So we're doing about 1,000 a year and rotating.
Okay. Thank you.
this really small accounting question, is the 80 or so, 87,000, does that come out of the capital reserves or something like this, or is that general fund, or is like, where does that money?
So there's still space in Chris's budget, and that's because if you remember last year we kind of doubled up on the purchases because we were trying to beat a price curve. We're doing the same thing again this year, but this year the space is still in the budget because we had done it.
Sorry, I meant access controls.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I may not have said, but is it the same thing? Is
Access
that in
con-
Chris' budget as well?
access controls.
That's
No, that's facilities.
It's facilities budget. Oh, okay, got it. Just like,
I view this as more of a capital project expense rather than coming out of general.
that's what I'm asking. So it don't come out of capital.
I'm just saying. No, since we didn't have to get the generator replaced, is
Oh.
that like a swap?
Cost neutral.
Exactly. Even Steven.
I think we're at the thank you, or not?
Yeah.
Yes, we are.
This is round 1 of 2.
Yeah, we're at the thank you, we're at the thank you.
Second slide.
Yes, but nothing else to say, right? Say thank you, thank you, thank you. So I will await a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second. All right, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you for all that.